EMP Series, Day 7. Today was Sunday, was the Lord's Day. After what happened yesterday, we all needed a day off. We'd harvested some apples and pears from the trees on the property. When Richie and I started prepping a few years back, we started propagating starters from our blackberry and raspberry bushes we had at our houses. We planted some at Steve's and at the church and at my property in Vermont as well. My favorite was the black raspberries. Past their season now, we had to be happy with the apples and pears. The women made pies and baked some homemade bread. We had the honey we traded from the farmer for the .45 ammo. Aaron shot a wild turkey in the woods out back this morning, and it smelled really good cooking under the pavilion. We opened several cans of veggies and put them in a pan of water, along with some dehydrated black beans and broccoli, and set it on the fire. While everything was cooking, Pastor preached an awesome sermon, and we sang songs of praise and worship to God. Afterward, we all sat down and broke bread together. After we ate, the women sat on the lawn watching the children play, and the men went up behind the parsonage and had a friendly competition, chipping golf balls into a 5-gallon pail. Aaron and Pastor both had a set of clubs at the church. Life almost seemed normal for a while. Greg pulled me aside to talk on our own. He asked me, "Do you hear that?" I listened, and I told him I did hear something. It sounded like trucks. He told me that they were old World War II era trucks. He'd been watching them from the tower. He said they were coming in and out of the school property a mile away. He could see the part of the road from the tower and would catch a glimpse of them now and again. He said those guys were the ones that shot Jerry yesterday. "I'm going to get me a little payback," he said. I looked at him, puzzled. He said, "They cut off your hand, we cut off their head. They kill one of ours, we kill 10 of theirs." He had an elaborate plan to cut a tree down across the road to stop the convoy. Then, when they were stopped, he wanted me and Richie to drop another tree that we would have all ready to go in the back of them, trapping them in. He assured me he could then take them out, one at a time with the .30-06 from a safe place back in the woods, using one of Aaron's tree stands. I put my hand on his shoulder, kindly reminded him that that was not who we were. It was not our role to mete out justice. That was God's right alone. I told him I knew Jerry's death hurt. It hurt me, but unless my life was in direct danger, I would not engage anyone in combat. Only in the defense of myself or other innocent people would I fight. We sat in the woods on a rock. He started to cry. I cried too. I told him we could not let this turn into the very thing we were fighting. Once we started down that path, there would be no turning back. We would be no better than the men we killed in the barn the other day. We could not allow ourselves to become that. We prayed together for strength and for peace in our hearts. We walked back out of the woods and rejoined the group. By this time the men had dispersed. Pastor was napping in a hammock. Steve and Richie were sitting at the picnic table under the pavilion cleaning guns. I looked up on the lawn behind the parsonage on the hill. I saw Jolie sitting alone on a swing. She was having a tough time with Jerry's death. At that moment, I wanted to go find Greg and help him carry out his plan for revenge. Instead, I went over and helped Steve and Richie clean the weapons. Aaron walked over and placed a walkie-talkie on the table and said, I'm going hunting. I'm on channel 2. I cautioned him not to wander out past radio range and to stay away from the road, and told him about the truck activity we saw. Greg was in the tower with the 30-06. I whistled to get his attention. When he looked down at me, I put my 2 fingers up to my eyes and then pointed at Aaron, who was walking off into the field and back. Greg understood that I meant for him to follow Aaron and provide him with security support. I knew Aaron liked to hunt alone, but that was just too bad. We weren't going to lose another man. Not on my watch. Besides, I knew he'd probably never even see or hear Greg following him. After a while, Pastor woke and joined us at the table. He shared with us his burden for an elderly member of our church family. Miss Mary Paulson was a sweet, kind old lady. She recently lost her husband. The 2 of them had been the very first members of our congregation 28 years ago, when Pastor came out to New England and started this church. Her husband was a faithful man of God, a true prayer warrior, and always Pastor's biggest supporter. He was buried at the bottom of the steps leading up to the pavilion, which bore his name. It had been dedicated to him when the church had it built several years back. A plaque even hung on the wall with his picture and a dedication note. Miss Mary lived alone now out in the woods on a lonely dirt country road. Her husband and she built the house together with their own hands over 60 years ago. This would have been their 65th wedding anniversary. She could not bring herself to leave that house. Her kids, grown and scattered all over the country, had certainly tried. Her oldest daughter lived in Tennessee and had tried many times to get her to join her and her family there. She told her daughter that too much of her father was in that house. Their whole lives had been in that house. They built it as newlyweds and raised 7 children there together. Pastor went out to visit and check on her weekly. He chopped firewood for her, brought her to her doctor's appointments, and to the grocery store. He offered to pick up her groceries for her, but she wouldn't hear of that. She said she wanted to do it for herself as much as she could. Now she was up there alone, with no power and no means of communication, an 87-year-old widow with no way to contact the outside world. It was weighing heavy on Pastor's heart. Pastor told us he wanted to go retrieve her and bring her back to the church. It was 25 miles away, along mostly country lanes and dirt roads. He knew it would be dangerous, but he said he just had to go. He didn't expect any of us to take the risk with him. He told us he could leave early in the morning and be back before dark if all went well. Richie told him that he understood and that he thought Pastor should go. He also said that he was not going to let him go alone and that he would go with him. Greg and I nodded and told him we were in also. Steve and Aaron would remain behind and pull security for the camp. We would roll out early tomorrow morning. Linda and Lee processed what was left of the turkey and added it to a large pot with water and the leftover veggies, and made a delicious soup for dinner for the group. Afterwards, we built a big fire in the fireplace and enjoyed fellowshipping with one another. Richie and Pastor were over in a corner at a picnic table going over the logistics of our trip tomorrow. The trail we used to get out back to connect with the road was an old logging road. It was overgrown, nothing more than a trail now. It connected to the electric supplier's power line road that eventually led to the road to the northwest. We were pretty sure we could get the power wagon down the trail. Once on the power line, it was an easy ride to the back road. We wanted to avoid the main roads and didn't want to dismantle the blockade we built in the driveway. Richie filled the power wagon with gas and checked the oil. It was just past dusk when Aaron walked back into camp with Greg. Each of them were carrying half a deer on their shoulders, a large doe. As the fire started to die back, people slowly started to go inside for the night. Pastor Greg, Richie, and I stayed out and went over every detail of the trip tomorrow. What route to take, what weapons to bring with us, times, fallback places to meet if we got separated for some reason, etc. We went over the whole plan several times. It was now getting late, and we went in for the night. I told Linda about our plan for tomorrow, and I could tell she was concerned. "Be careful and get back safely," was all she said. She reminded me of a comforting promise from God's Word, how He promises us He will never leave us or forsake us. We just had to trust in Him. I certainly did trust God. I was also very happy that He allowed me to have the Mini 14 and plenty of ammo for it as well. We talked for a bit and fell asleep.